urging him to make a quick decision. Why are you still bothering me? Either submit to Tyuujia or be beaten to death by Tyuujia's elder, becoming the first king of hell in history to be blown into thin air by a living person. So Jiang Vong stood up and crossed his arms to decide for himself. Having said that, Song Devong sighed. He respectfully bowed to Diu Bin. The winner is my king and I have lost. From now on, he was willing to follow Tyuujia's orders, absolutely no longer resented Diu Bin, and no longer had any plans with Song Emperor, he said softly. The two Hell Kings helped him up together, emotionally giving Song Emperor a few words, so it was true that if he surrendered early, the Black Wings would not be destroyed. King Song shook his head sadly. Second brother, don't talk anymore. I have lost a lot of yin yuan now, extremely weak. Diu Bin waved his hand and called him. Song Emperor, come here. King Song respectfully and carefully bowed little by little. Does Tyuujia have anything to advise? Deep in his heart, he was worried that Diu Bin would change his mind. Perhaps he would regret it and want to kill him. Without saying a word, Diu Bin threw both of his arms into a strong posture towards Emperor Song. He suddenly let out a scream and fell to the ground. Diu Bin said humorously, giving you a gift. Qin Kuangvong hurriedly helped King Song to stand up. He held his chest and coughed. Is old Tam Dia okay? Qin Kuangvong looked behind Emperor Song and suddenly discovered that his brother's 3 black wings had grown back. He looked back and saw that his wings had grown back. He spread his wings and restored them to their original state. Emperor Song was truly moved and convinced. He knelt down and sincerely bowed to Diu Bin, thanking little Diujia for giving me his black wings. Diu Bin graciously reached out to support the King of Song. This is an era that no longer has this kind of rule. If you kneel at the slightest moment, don't stand up. Along the way, Diu Bin seriously asked about the matter. Before that, I saw a person sitting on a large palanquin entering Trung Min Palace. That person was Lang Van Fong. Why is he still there? Where is my body now? Emperor Song confusedly scratched his beard. That person was indeed Lang Van Fong. Little Diujia's body was hidden by him, but I don't know where he hid it. Having said that, he bowed his head and said sincerely, I am willing to go with little Diujia to Duong to find the body, to atone for my sins. So Jiang Vong volunteered to participate. I'll go too. Tan Quang Vong also excitedly contributed. His grandmother was bored in this underworld, and finally had something to do. Diu Bin rubbed his chin and thought, then said, I will go back to Earth to explore the situation first, you guys will follow. As he finished speaking, a circle of purple light enveloped Diu Bin, causing him to gradually fly up. At the top of Nien Tan Fu, the moonlight had risen. Diu Bin was in a soul state. He appeared in his room and looked at the empty bed. His body had indeed disappeared. Diu Bin tried going through the window. The soul state was very convenient. If it weren't for the fact that the soul couldn't leave the body for too long, it would be fun to keep this form. Suddenly a system panel appeared. He attentively read the content. The Emperor Vong agreed to receive 100 million yuan in Trung Min Palace, and could choose one of 2 special prizes. When Diu Bin heard about the award, he became curious. What is this special award? The reward content is clearly displayed on the system board. Considering your excellent performance this time, you can activate the special skill below. Please choose to give an extra life with the charm that makes the spirits of all worlds go crazy. Diu Bin read for a while, then pressed the off button and then flew away. Now in the state where the soul chooses the prize, it cannot be used. After finding the body, I decided to go to the Mac family to confirm Ti Gao's situation first, not knowing whether her soul had returned to her body. Diu Bin has arrived at the Mac family's villa. His soul state cannot talk to others. He must find someone to enter. After observing for a while, Diu Bin Lin saw the figure of Le Suyen at the window and decided that yes, he would join the 4 ladies. Le Suyen was standing next to the hospital bed with Mak Ton Tong. Suddenly, Diu Bin's soul entered her. Mak Ton Tong turned to ask Le Suyen and 2 Nha Do what I proposed. Diu Bin in Le Suyen's body suddenly panicked. His hands frantically hugged Mak Ton Tong, surprised. Jiu Bin stabilized his body and answered for Lasuyan, "No, it's okay, Mr. Mac, what you said earlier." Mac Tontong frowned in suspicion, but in the end he still recognized and asked, "Little Jiu." Jiu Bin sighed and explained that something happened to me, so I temporarily borrowed the fourth lady's body for a while. Looking at Mac Tigao lying quietly on the bed, Mac Tontong said, "I planned to contact you in the morning, but I didn't expect you to have arrived." Gao Gao's condition was very strange. I asked the master to come and take a look. They had no choice. Jiu Bin replied, "Let me take a look." In Lasuyan Jiu Bin's body, he touched Mac Tigao's seal and a jeweled ring appeared on his hand. Jiu Bin looked at Mac Tigao and explained, "I brought her soul back and nothing happened anymore." Jiu Bin cast a spell to revive the soul from the ring and flew straight into Mac Tigao's mouth. When finished, he held the ring and said, "Done." After saying that, he walked towards the door and wanted to leave. "Mr. Mac, don't worry, I will go deal with the guy behind this now," Mac Tontong called out. Tiu Jiu came out. He stopped to ask, then Mo Tontong sadly scratched his head. Well, after all, it was the body of the fourth girl, hoping he would have some pity. At this time, thunder and lightning erupted at the Lang family villa. Lang Vanfong and his two subordinates returned home angrily. As soon as he entered, he cursed uncomfortably. Damn, he was almost overtaken by Jiu Bin. Luckily, I ran fast. The subordinate wearing a suit cunningly instigated, "Young master, is that kid's body hidden in the basement or directly?" Lang Vanfong thought for a while, intending to keep his body to threaten him and make him submit to me. Now it seems that it is best to deal with it. With a bang, the door behind him fell to pieces, followed by thunder and lightning, and Jiu Bin in the form of Lasuyan boldly walked in. "Young Master Lang." Jiu Bin boldly walked in, coming to visit at midnight, hoping that Lang would not pay attention. Lang Vanfong's subordinates were extremely alert in their attack stance. "Oh." Lang Vanfong stopped his subordinates and politely said, "Four ladies came for business or private matters." Jiu Bin leisurely sat down on the chair and came to ask Lang to help him with something personal. Lang Vanfong squinted his eyes suspiciously at Lasuyan. This woman was Mac Tontong's confidant. He couldn't offend her. Let's clarify her purpose for coming here first. He poured the tea and spoke politely. "I am a junior and cannot bear the word. Please, Miss Four, if you have any requests, just say so." Jiu Bin still pretended to be Lasuyan holding the cup of tea to deliberately delay the time. "I was in no hurry to come all the way here just when I was very thirsty to drink the previous cup of tea." The clock ticked. Lang Vanfong shook his legs, looking like he was very impatient. He began to feel suspicious as he lazily propped his chin up and said, "Miss Four, you've been drinking tea for half an hour, so why are you looking for me?" Suddenly someone appeared behind Lang Vanfong. Jiu Bin's voice rang out, "The person looking for you was not the four girls, it was me." Lang Vanfong frowned and said, "Jiu Bin." Jiu Bin slowly walked out of the secret passage. "Lang Vanfong, you hid my body too well, making me find it so hard." Lang Vanfong rolled his eyes and signaled to his subordinates behind him. "Four girls, did you call to buy time?" Jiu Bin happily replied. Standing behind him, Lang Vanfong's subordinate took advantage of the opportunity to sneak attack. Kim Chung porridge, bang, the subordinate hit the shield and fell to the floor. Jiu Bin was firmly protected in a magic shield. He glanced at the subordinate lying on the ground. Young Master Lang's way of being a guest was very special. Lang Vanfong was silent then burst into laughter. He pointed at Jiu Bin and said, "If you've arrived, don't leave here." Lang Vanfong turned around and threatened, "Jiu Bin in my family has dozens of experts. No matter how powerful you are, you will die." Lasuyan has now returned to his normal state. Young Master Lang intends to kill everyone. He wants to officially declare war on Mac Jia. Lang Vanfong did not hesitate to lift Lasuyan's chin and threaten, "As long as you all die and no one knows I did it, Mac Jia has no evidence and can't do anything to me." Jiu Bin replied frankly, "Who told you that as long as we die here, no one will know?" Lang Vanfong is a bit scared right now. "What do you mean?" At the same time, his subordinates hurriedly ran in to report that the young Master Mac family, the Sao family, Vong family, and the big families of Bin Hai had all arrived. As soon as he entered the door, the subordinate slipped and fell to the ground, breaking a tooth, looking very miserable. They said that young master kidnapped little Dujia and 2 Miss Nun, intending to humiliate 2 Miss Nun, and wanted young master to explain. Lang Van Fong twitched the corner of his mouth. This was also arranged by you. Du Bin crossed his arms with a very appreciative expression. How could I make 2 Miss Nui take risks with me? Of course I had to prepare in advance. Lang Van Fong had no way to give orders to his subordinates. He led those people to the conference room and sent these 2 people off as well. The subordinate received the final order, yes. Du Bin proudly winked in celebration with Le Suyen. While Du Bin and Le Suyen were leaving, a mysterious black-clothed man appeared behind Lang Van Fong. That person said to him in a low voice, "Young master, what should we do now even though we are not afraid of the Bin Hai forces? But now Fu Nam's Trong family is like a tiger stalking its prey. At this sensitive moment, we shouldn't stir up conflict." Lang Van Fong raised his eyebrows. I know. He added that the 2 of them were not injured as long as there were no witnesses. They could not do anything even if they beat them to death and would not admit it. Outside in the deserted hallway, Tran Tiu Thien hid, observing the situation. Not knowing what she was thinking, she opened the door and invited everyone in. In Lang Jia's conference room, Lang Van Fong politely explained, as I just said, Tiu Jia and 2 Miss Nun had something to do in the middle of the night so they came to visit. There was absolutely no way I forced the 2 of them to come. Le Suyen looked weak and covered his fan and said, what Mr. Lang means is that Tiu Jia and I slandered you. Lang Van Fong refused to admit it. In the past, Du Bin and I were competing for the position of alliance leader. Everyone knew about this. Maybe at that time he held a grudge in his heart and waited for the opportunity to take revenge. He threatened in a bad voice. The people sitting here are all prominent figures in Bin Hai, so there is no evidence. Don't slander us unless you want our Lang family to lose face. There was the sound of the door opening and Tran Tiu Thien appeared. Why were there so many people? After saying that, she plopped into Lang Van Fong's arms. He pretended to love and hugged Tran Tiu Thien in his arms. Why aren't you sleeping yet? She coyly replied, what's wrong with being so warm that I can't sleep? Lang Van Fong teased Tran Tiu Thien lovingly. There was a misunderstanding. He waited for me to resolve it, then he would go to sleep with me. After he finished speaking, he held the beauty with one hand as if it was nothing and continued to speak. I of course believed you. Bin and 2 Miss did not intentionally slander me. Perhaps there was some misunderstanding. Du Bin suddenly pointed at Tran Tiu Thien and asked, who is she? Lang Van Fong hugged her. She was my girlfriend. He squinted and thought to himself, the bastard just saw that his small hall was becoming more animalistic. Du Bin looked at them with eyes full of interest. He turned away to continue questioning. You said you couldn't testify about what I said to Miss Tu, so it's okay to invite your girlfriend to be a witness. Lang Van Fong stroked Tran Tiu Thien's chin. I told them in the hall. Did you do anything to harm Du Bin and Miss Tu? She obeyed and said yes. Tran Tiu Thien stood up and slowly spoke. As far as I know, she gently stroked her hair. Lang Van Fong planned to imprison the body of the little Du family. And when the 4 girls came to claim justice, he was humiliated. If you hadn't come, he would have probably killed the 4 girls and the little Du family. Everyone was extremely surprised. Mr. Cao looked at Lang Van Fong with disdain. I thought Lang was young and talented thanks to his ability to sit in the head of the house, but I didn't expect to use such cruel tricks. Le Suyen also added fuel to the fire to expose him. He probably didn't know that because Uncle Lang wanted to sit in this position, he even dared to kill his uncle. Lang Van Fong was angry. He was about to stand up. You dare to betray me. Poor Tran Tiu Thien sobbed. What are you talking about? You brought me here. Otherwise how could a weak girl like me be able to enter a place as strictly fortified as the Lang family? Lang Van Fong pointed at her. I probed her many times but she didn't have any loopholes. I didn't expect that she was one of Du Bin's people, but this evidence was not enough to incriminate her. Tran Tiu Thien pulled something out of his chest. Since Master Lang said so, I still have other evidence. It was a tape recorder, and the device turned on. His voice rang out. Lang Vanfong's face turned pale. Mak Ti Gao is the first target. Song Devong is the second target. Remember to keep an eye on Du Bin's body. If this can't deal with him, then destroy his body immediately. Master Diem Vong is very cruel. In my opinion, there is no need for Emperor Song to take action, then that Du Bin will die. Tran Tiu Thien rushed forward to hug Mr. Cao. Mr. Cao had to be the master of the small hall. Mr. Cao raised the recorder and looked harshly at Lang Vanfong. Lang Vanfong, what else do you want to say? Mak Tontong angrily pointed his finger. I didn't expect you to dare to touch Ti Gao. I see that Lang is the one who made my Mak family lose all face. After a while, Lang Vanfong still refused to admit it. He crossed his arms and calmly said, just based on this recording, he wants to condemn me. Du Bin, you are too naive. Du Bin seemed to have anticipated this attitude of his. You really haven't shed a tear since seeing the coffin, so I'll find another witness to make you stop denying it. Lang Vanfong waved his hand and called out to his subordinates. You come here. He discreetly gave orders to watch the entrance. No matter what witnesses Du Bin called, he would not let you in. When he was done, he turned around with a smug tone. Okay then, you call that witness out here. Du Bin pointed and said, that person has arrived. Out of smoke, a giant statue appeared behind him. Come out here. Lang Vanfong, Mak Tontong and Mr. Cao were all shocked and surprised. Especially Lang Vanfong. He shouted in horror, Emperor Song. Song Devong suddenly appeared behind Du Bin. Everyone present began to admire and discuss. Oh my god, I didn't expect that when I was alive, I would be able to see Diem King. King Song respectfully bowed, and the little Du family brother lightly nodded in response. Stabilizing the situation, Du Bin began to ask Emperor Song, it was difficult for you to go to Earth for a trip. Can you tell me what Lang Vanfong did in the end? Lang Vanfong frowned and threatened in a threatening voice. Song Emperor, I advise you to think about it and say otherwise. Song Devong responded, otherwise why would he want to rob my Trung Min palace? Lang Vanfong's eyes looked angry at him and he said, even you betrayed me. Emperor Song performed a magic spell on Lang Vanfong, causing him to fall to the floor next to his subordinates screaming, young master. Song Devong touched the wound on his face, looked down at Lang Vanfong and said coldly, from now on I don't have any relationship with you, so I can do anything. Song Devong continued to speak, today I came here to prove that Lang Vanfong harmed the little Du family's soul, arbitrarily detained the little Du family's body and intended to kill the little Du family. Mr. Cao asked indignantly, Lang Vanfong, what else do you have to say? Lang Vanfong trembled as his subordinates helped him up. Even though he admitted his guilt, I admitted that these things were all my doing. But his subordinates quickly stopped him, young master. Mak Tontong seemed surprised. He was crazy. Why did another person also speak up in surprise? He didn't expect to admit it. Someone even exclaimed, Lang Vanfong's brain has been eaten by a dog. Lang Vanfong is clearly showing his evil nature at this time. Is it because I did it? So I ask you sitting here, have you never done these things? He sat down on a chair surrounded by close subordinates. The Lang family now only has me as the heir. Even if you look down on me, I am still the head of the Lang family. Think again, you guys have also cooperated with the Lang family for many years. If you really betrayed me because of that kid Du Bin, have you thought about the consequences? Du Bin shook his head and retorted, who said that you are the only heir in the Lang family? Lang Vanfong felt a bit guilty when he heard this. What do you mean? Mak Tontong brought in a mysterious young man. Tiu Fong, long time no see. Le Suyen opened his eyes and looked meaningfully at the young man. He pulled down his mask to reveal his handsome face. Some parts looked similar to Lang Vanfong. I came to take back what belonged to me. Lang Vanfong frowned, expressing his attitude, saying, are you not dead yet? Team leader Lang took off his mask. He smiled and said, I didn't die. You're very disappointed, aren't you? Everyone saw the appearance of group leader Lang and started talking. The woman turned to ask the person next to her. Who is this person? The person next to him shook his head and replied, I don't know, it must be a relative of Lang Vanfong. Le Suyen raised his hand towards him and introduced himself. I would like to introduce to you. This person is the real heir, appointed by the previous term's leader. That year, because Lang Vanfong wanted this position, he chased and killed his uncle. If it wasn't for my timely help, I'm afraid the Lang family would have been defeated in Lang Vanfong's hands. Lang Vanfong glanced at him and smiled, coldly saying, "To Miss Nun said there must be physical evidence." Le Suyen used a fan to cover her face. She frowned and her eyes showed some awkwardness. Liu Bin smiled and said, "Four ladies, leave it to me." He looked up and said, Song Emperor opened the mantra of hell. Song Emperor immediately agreed. A whooshing sound rang out. Song Emperor's body turned into black liquid. There was a clicking sound and a black liquid was falling onto Mak Tontong's chest. The room was immediately surrounded by black liquid. Liu Bin calmly stood there smiling. Lang Vanfong looked at his feet and was startled. Everyone present also panicked and said, "Hey, what's going on?" Liu Bin spoke up to reassure everyone. Everyone can rest assured that he only brought the true gate of hell to this room and will not harm everyone. At this time, the bottom was constantly boiling and gurgling, a long sharp horn. The white color rose up. Two skull-shaped chairs appeared to be surrounded by black liquid. He began to explain. Everyone probably knows the rules of the mantra of hell. If you sit on this chair, if you lie, you will be punished by hell. If Mr. Lang refuses to admit it, then please sit on the chair to avoid being falsely accused. Le Suyen covered his face and approached the wedding, saying, "I'm not afraid of being punished." Suddenly, group leader Lang grabbed her hand. He looked at Le Suyen and said, making her blush, "Let me sit anyway, it's okay, of the Lang family." Group leader Lang sat down on the chair and smiled at Le Suyen. Liu Bin looked at Lang Vanfong. He made a hand gesture towards the chair and said, "He is also sitting, what about you?" Lang Vanfong saw that the situation was not good. His eyebrows were furrowed and sweating. The bespectacled assistant behind him worriedly called out to the master. The assistant pointed the computer at Lang Vanfong and said urgently, "The elders of the Lang family didn't know where they heard the news, but they all videoed it here," saying that if he could not prove his innocence, his status as homeowner would be revoked. Lang Vanfong turned his head to look. His face changed color. Lang Vanfong frowned and shouted, "Liu Bin, this matter was also arranged by you." Group leader Lang leisurely sat on the chair. He smiled and looked at Lang Vanfong and said that it had nothing to do with the little Liu family. "Because I did it, otherwise I'm afraid you'll kill someone and erase all the evidence." Lang Vanfong looked at him with an angry expression. Group leader Lang and Lang Vanfong were already sitting in their seats. Liu Bin shouted to start walking. Group leader Lang recounted that before his death, the old Tai family left behind a will. In addition to dividing the assets, he also appointed me as the new head of the Lang family. But Lang Vanfong bribed the secretary of the old Tai family, telling the secretary to reveal the contents of the will. Knowing that he was not allowed to be the head of the house, he tried every way to assassinate me to take that position. He crossed his legs to show his attitude and said, "At that time I was seriously injured, fortunately thanks to the help of the fourth miss. If I wanted to survive, I could only leave Zedong and hide incognito and go to Binhai." After Captain Lang finished speaking, Liu Bin looked at Lang Vanfong and said, "The black mud of hell's mantra did not react. It seems that what he said was true. Lang Vanfong, is your turn." At this moment, Lang Vanfong's face turned black and filled with hatred. The assistant next to him quickly called out in a low voice, causing him to regain his composure. "Young master, please speak quickly, the elders of the Lang family are watching." Hearing this, Lang Vanfong avoided the issue. He stammered and said, "Why would he buy dozens of people to assassinate me?" Before he could finish bluffing, the words of hell caught up with him. Lang Vanfong was frightened and shouted non-stop. He got angry and shouted, "Liu Bin, are you a bad guy?" Liu Bin stretched out his hand and calmly looked at him and replied, "This mantra of hell was brought by Emperor Song. What can I do?" Lang Vanfong gritted his teeth and said to you. He was surprised at this moment. "I discovered that the mantra of hell was getting tighter and tighter on my body." He stood up and broke the black liquid clinging to his body. Lang Van Fong shouted arrogantly, admitting that it was me who did it. The secretary next to him, hearing that, trembled and called out to the boss. Lang Van Fong turned his head and looked arrogantly and said, even though the old Thai family left behind such a will that year, do you guys really want to give the position of head of the family to the dog of the Mac family? Lang Van Fong looked at the computer and said defiantly, unless you want to destroy everything the Lang family has, or unless you want the forces of Chiat Dong to surrender to Bin Hai. The other side of the screen did not say anything. Just keep quiet. Only later did the other side respond and say, after all, this is the Lang family's matter. I hope everyone here doesn't pass it on. As for the results, after the family meeting is over, we will hold a press conference. When Mo Ton Tong heard that, he frowned and replied, although little Lang is not a member of my family, he has followed me for many years, in case Lang Van Fong causes disadvantages for him. The other side quickly responded, Mac Lao, rest assured that I will take the name of the Lang Jiedong family and promise that no matter who is the head of the family, Lang Trak will not be injured at all. Mac Ton Tong listened. After that, he stood up and said, if you say so, then I can rest assured, you guys will handle the rest yourself, late at night at the Lang family villa. Mac Ton Tong patted group leader Lang's shoulder and advised him, if you can't be the homeowner, it's okay. Bin Hai is always your home. He immediately replied, I know. Lang Van Fong leaned against the wall. He was yin and yang. The monster said, some influential people in Bin Hai, because of a kid, ran to the Lang family's house in the middle of the night to cause trouble. If they got out, they would lose face and die. Le Suyen came out and looked at him and replied, where's the shame of someone killing your own uncle? Lang Van Fong just felt cold when he heard that. Mac Ton Tong looked at Lang Van Fong and spoke. After tonight, there will definitely be people who will not be convinced, but just now everyone saw it with their own eyes. Even Emperor Song respected the Tiu Diu family. I'm afraid no one will doubt the strength of the Tiu Diu family in the future. Mr. Cao nodded in agreement and replied, that's right, as long as the Tiu Diu family is here, we in Bin Hai will become North China, even become a powerful arm for China. Lang Van Fong looked at the crowd below and disdainfully said, you're stupid, just as Diu Bin was walking out. Lang Van Fong glanced at Diu Bin and whispered, to let more people know his strength, aren't you afraid of people coming to destroy the estate? I heard him say it and looked puzzled. Diu Bin replied to Lang Van Fong, these two words, idiot, suit you better. He was startled when he heard that. He walked over and shouted loudly to everyone. Everyone immediately turned their attention to him. Diu Bin loudly declared, today you all see my strength, still saying that whoever can defeat me, I will teach him everything. Everyone present heard that and fell into silence. He walked to the car door and sarcastically said to Lang Van Fong, I'm different and you don't like to hide things. The sound of the car starting up rang out and left Lang Jia's villa. Lang Van Fong gritted his teeth and trembled in anger, his hand crushed into pieces. The balcony welcomed Tan Fu in the morning. The wind and sunlight streamed through the window, causing Diu Bin to wake up. The doors suddenly opened. Holding a tray of food, I smiled and said, have breakfast. He lazily sat up, lazily stretched and thought to himself, what happened last night was bad for me. I couldn't sleep until morning. I was too sleepy. And Trong Hu Boy stood next to me, humming happily. She held up the spoon of porridge and said, Diu Bin happily ate the spoon of porridge that was given to him. The little angel Diu Bin was also so happy that he cried. Trong Hu Boy asked while feeding Diu Bin, when did you go out last night? Why don't you know anything? I'm still enjoying being fed right now. Diu Bin yawned tiredly and replied, because something unexpected happened. The bowl of porridge can be seen at the bottom, and the food is full. Trong Hu Boy picked up the food tray and stood up to ask, are you going out today? Diu Bin put on his clothes and replied, is there anything else that needs to be done? She shook her head, smiled and said no. Nothing. The sound of the door closing. Trong Hu Boy leaned against the door and thought gloomily, I felt the distance between Diu Bin and me getting farther and farther, at the rest area on the highway. Diu Bin and Tru Kai were sitting eating ice cream. He asked Diu Bin, are you sure Lang Van Fong's fleet will pass by here? He smiled confidently and replied, I arranged a sticker next to Lang Van Fong. The information is absolutely accurate. Duo Bin thought to himself, although Emperor Song has severed his relationship with Lang Van Fong, there is still some relationship between him and the underworld. Following this clue, you can know his location. That way I don't have to worry. He used his elbow to nudge Tru Kai as he spoke. A nanny car was stopping. Lang Van Fong got out of the car. He instructed his subordinates, I want to rest here for a bit and then move on. You guys can do whatever you want. Lang Van Fong stepped inside and thought to himself, damn, the current situation is calling me to go home. Do those damn old masters really want Lang Trak to inherit the position of family head? He thought while choosing a drink of water that he must finish everything before returning to Zedong. Suddenly, a hand patted Lang Van Fong's shoulder and said, hello, making him startled. When Lang Van Fong saw him, he threw out his hand and shouted loudly. He smiled brightly and replied, I'm going to see you off for a while. Lang Van Fong frowned and asked in doubt, are you really that kind? Duo Bin smiled back, I came to see you off. As soon as he finished speaking, he unleashed his power. Lang Van Fong was surprised by Duo Bin's sudden movement. His prizes glowed purple, covering around Lang Van Fong. The sudden attack made him jump. A shadow flew quickly past. Faced with Duo Bin's strength, Lang Van Fong struggled to stand firm and said, do you want to fight here? He shook his head blandly and said, I'm not interested in fighting with a defeated general. This time someone else is coming to find you. He asked others suspiciously. Song Devong slowly appeared from behind the mist. Duo Bin saw that person had arrived. Lang Van Fong arrogantly crossed his arms and smiled. Song Emperor, you have severed your relationship with me. Yin Yuan is seriously injured. You won't fight me. Emperor Song frowned and seriously said, my Hak Kai wings belong to the 3 palaces and are unique. Tu Duo family can destroy it in an instant, and at the same time revive it. This power is incomprehensible to you. Lang Van Fong couldn't hear these words. He sneered and replied, just exploring the underworld a little faster than me. What's there to be proud of? Duo Bin patted Song Emperor's shoulder and advised him, no need to waste words on him. This place is left to you. Song Emperor Hak Kai Duck appeared. He waved at him and smiled, saying goodbye, Lang Van Fong. Outside, 2 subordinates stood there wondering, why hasn't the master come out yet? Should we take advantage of this time? Are you running away? The first guy looked at the guy next to him and said, if it weren't for bringing him back, we would have run away for a long time, so quickly go in and take a look. At that moment, a loud explosion rang out, and the other 2 quickly covered their faces. The huge explosion caused glass windows to rattle, and the roof of the convenience store also exploded. The 2 subordinates said loudly in surprise, what's going on? Master is still inside. In the car, Tru Kai looked at Duo Bin and said that it would be best to kill a dangerous person like Lang Van Fong as soon as possible. In case he returns to Jaedong, being protected by that group of old men would not be good. Duo Bin appeared. Looking at the system board, it fell into a state of slowness. He rubbed his chin and speculated in his heart. Lang Van Fong's name was not displayed on the Book of Life and Death. Could it be that he was dead? In the distance, that place was still collapsing, the sound was deafening, and sand and dust were flying up. In the morning at the amusement park, in the distance was the ghost pretending to be Duong. On this side, Duo Bin and Trong Hu Boy were sitting and drinking water together. He looked at the system notice board and thought thoughtfully, there have been no tasks to do recently. This scary point is not enough for me to use. If this continues, I don't know when. Just discovered a palace of the King of Hell. On the bulletin board it is written, the scary point of Duong plus 100. The scary point of Lin Yat Y plus 100. The scary point of Vong Tu Tai plus 190. A person wearing a black vest approached. He bowed his head respectfully and called out, little Duo Bin Tu Miss Nun had something to look for you. He was a bit surprised to hear that. Duo Bin was confused and asked why. The bodyguard waved his hand in confusion and replied, I'm only in charge of transmitting the word. Trong Hu Boy smiled and waved his hand and said, go to work, don't worry about me. I can go back to Nen Tan Fu myself. Duo Bin stood up and replied leisurely that was fine. The bodyguard followed Due Bin, but still looked back at Trong Hyu Boy and silently admired him, worthy of being from the Due family. I didn't expect my woman to be able to teach and listen to me like that, but she still waved goodbye behind her. After seeing that Due Bin had left, she turned around. Trong Hyu Boy puffed his cheeks and whispered a complaint. It was difficult for him to go out on a date. He was being disturbed. The Mac family's mansion was in the hallway. Due Bin asked the bodyguard's name. Before, they had always met in the living room or study room, but why did he come to the backyard this time? He scratched his head politely and replied, "It was all the idea of the fourth lady." "I don't dare to say anything." The bodyguard announced that the fourth young lady, Due Bin, had arrived. Le Suyen quickly ordered him to leave. The bodyguard bowed and said yes. Due Bin looked at her in confusion and asked, "Is Mr. Mac looking for me?" Le Suyen raised his hand, gestured to invite him in, then continued. Due Bin slowly walked in, when suddenly he was pushed down from behind by Le Suyen. He turned his head in surprise and said to Miss Nun. A click rang out and the door was closed. Le Suyen held the door. She blushed a little and asked, "Due Bin," I asked him, "when you entered my body, what did you do?" Recalling the image of himself secretly eating fruit, he blushed and embarrassedly scratched it, muttering and saying, "Ah, that's it." Le Suyen put his hand to his lips and told him to take off his shirt. When Due Bin heard that, he blushed and quickly stepped back to say something. Miss Nun gradually approached. She raised her hand to lift his chin, and Due Bin nervously swallowed his saliva. Le Suyen said in a seductive tone, "What's wrong, or do you want me to help you take it off?" Due Bin could only blush and open his eyes wide. There was a scream from inside the room. "Fourth Miss Nun, I know I was wrong, please forgive me." Due Bin had been stripped of all his clothes, leaving only his shorts, lying tightly on the chair. He stuttered and sweated and asked her what she wanted to do. Le Suyen bent down to get something. She just smiled without answering. Le Suyen picked up the spear from the drawer. She carried the stick on her shoulder. Her dangerous face slowly said, "If you dare to eat my tofu, I will have to teach you a lesson." When Due Bin saw this atmosphere, his sweat dropped and quickly replied, "There was no need for Nun to go to this extent." A scream of pain erupted and the sound of the knife hitting flesh filled the room. A moment later, Le Suyen stopped beating. Due Bin was beaten several times until his skin turned red. He frowned and said pitifully, "Fourth Miss Nun, I'm sorry. You also beat me. Adults don't tolerate petty people. Can you forgive me?" Le Suyen happily took out his phone to take a photo and told me I had to save the evidence. Her foot stepped on the chair where he was sitting, a somewhat dangerous position. Le Suyen stood full of strength and warned him, "If you dare to touch me again, I will post these photos online, you know?" Due Bin blushed and nodded when he saw Le Suyen approaching and replied, "Yes, I know." Seeing Due Bin still blushing and staring, Le Suyen blushed angrily. She covered it with her hand, tapped his head and said she was still looking. Due Bin had a lump on his head. He stuck out his sweaty tongue and thought to himself, "Miss Tu is really as fierce as a tigress. Only people like Captain Lang can stand her." Le Suyen went to the desk and said, "Yes, I asked you to come here today. Actually, there is something to discuss." She searched for documents on the table and continued to say, "Someone from the Lang family has arrived, saying they want to marry the Mac family." Due Bin frowned and probed. Mr. Mac refused. Le Suyen waved the papers in his hand and replied, "I thought he would refuse, but 10 minutes before you arrived at the Mac family's house, he had already called the mistress to the living room." When he heard that, he got angry and stood up, broke the rope and said loudly, "What?" Le Suyen handed the documents to Due Bin, said with a serious face, "The old man is grateful to me. If you and him have a conflict, I will definitely take his side, understand?" He took the document from Le Suyen's hand. Due Bin skimmed it and replied, "I understand, thank you Miss Nun for reminding me." She stood up and looked at him and said, "You don't need to be nervous, he hasn't accepted this marriage yet, it's still negotiable, come I'll take you there." In the living room at the Shogunate, Mac Ti Dao was sitting playing the piano, her graceful fingers dancing on the keys. The man and woman applauded, the woman said words of praise. The owner is not only beautiful but also multi-talented. Mr. Mac really knows how to teach. The man next to him immediately complimented her. Mac Tontong said to Mac Ti Dao, "You go rest first. I have something to discuss with them." She obediently smiled and replied. He watched her back upstairs until Mac Ti Dao was gone. The voice in the living room rang out. "That girl is indeed as talented as rumored. If that girl knew my family's Tiu Fong, she would be a talented boy and a beautiful girl. A match made in heaven." Mac Ti Dao would be spoiled to hear that. I thought coldly, not long after I left, he had something to hide from me. Mo Tontong politely replied, "Dao Dao is still young and it's still too early to talk about marriage, let alone these emotional matters. I absolutely respect her opinion." The woman immediately said that to show her sincerity, the Lang family would give 3 large inheritances to the mistress, as a gift. What do you think? She turned to look at the man who spoke, and as for the slowly growing feelings, he next to her answered correctly. When Mac Tontong heard that, he fell into silence. She turned to the man and said, "What are you doing? You should also say 2 or 3 sentences, why'd I keep talking?" He faltered and said, "Oh okay." The man held a jade bracelet and confidently said that this was a spirit stone passed down from his ancestors. He considered it a gift to meet the mistress. Suddenly there was a scream, "I don't need your things." Everyone turned their heads to look and saw Mac Ti Gao standing upstairs. She was so angry that she cried loudly, "I already have someone I like. I'm far from willing to marry someone else." The sound of the door opening came. Jiu Bin was confused when he saw Mac Ti Gao crying, while Le Suyen next to him chuckled and said, "It seems we came at the right time." Mac Ti Gao was startled and surprised. When she saw someone appearing, she softly said to Mr. Jiu Bin, seeing the awkward situation, he asked, "Do you have someone you like?" Mac Ti Gao stomped her foot loudly. Her eyes filled with tears and she shouted loudly at the idiot. After saying that, Mac Ti Gao ran away. When running past him, sparkling tears fell. Jiu Bin immediately noticed. He watched Mac Ti Gao leave. Le Suyen smiled and patted his shoulder to encourage him, but he was still there, so what was he doing? He quickly ran after her to comfort her. When Jiu Bin heard that, he agreed. He ran after him and called out, "Wait, Ti Gao." Lazan blinked and covered his mouth, laughing silently. Mac Tontong sighed politely and said, "You two have heard it too, please go home." The dissatisfied woman spoke up. "We represented the Lang family to discuss the marriage, but he called Jiu Bin to come. Don't you want us to feel awkward?" The man quickly whispered to her not to say that. Mac Tontong looked at the other person with sharp eyes. He replied eloquently, "This place is the Mac family's house. If I want to invite anyone here, do I need your permission?" Mac Tontong shouted loudly, "The Lang family in Jaedong is the boss, but here the Mac family is the boss." His aura makes the opponent feel afraid. Because he was so excited, Mac Tontong kept shouting. Le Suyen stood next to him and quickly patted his back to relax him. She smiled with a gentle face and said, "Master, don't be angry, they don't mean it that way. After all, in this Binhai, who would dare to question you?" Le Suyen finished speaking and looked at them with disgusted eyes. The man scratched his head in confusion, quickly grabbed the hand of the woman next to him. He stood up and said, "It was our fault, Mr. Mac, don't take it to heart. We'll leave now, please calm down." Le Suyen saw the two of them off. He helped her and went to call her, but the woman was angry and cold. The housekeeper also helped Mac Tontong go to rest, leaving only Le Suyen and the maid cleaning. Tightly she noticed the box on the table. Le Suyen closed his eyes and ordered, "Throw this away. Don't let it dirty my eyes here." The maid quickly responded. The sound of footsteps echoed continuously. Jiu Bin was chasing Mac Ti Gao. I called out to Ti Gao, "Don't run too fast and fall." She turned her head and angrily replied that he didn't need to worry. Jiu Bin stopped and raised his hands, resigned and said he didn't worry. Mac Ti Gao puffed her cheeks and looked at him. He gently patted her head and said, "I just care about you." Mac Ti Gao blushed in embarrassment. She mumbled, "I'm far from caring for you. I listened to your words to take care of you." "Stop." She got angry and sulked and kicked her feet away. Ju Bin also realized at this time that he thought to himself, Ti Gao is acting like a babe, is it possible that she is? He was so excited that he swallowed his saliva. Ju Bin raised his hand towards her. He blushed and confessed his heart. Ti Gao, I care about you. It has nothing to do with Mr. Mac. It's just that from the bottom of my heart I care about you. He reached out and gently touched Mac Ti Gao's face and whispered, Ti Gao, you clearly understand my thoughts. Hearing these sweet words made her blush.